Okay, hello everybody. So today we're going to begin our discussion in Chapter 4, Section 2. And in this section, we continue what we were talking about in 4.1, in that we will now actually begin to graph rational functions. In the previous section, we just learned how to find different aspects of the actual function graph, but without actually sketching the graph. So here we're going to sketch the graph. So if you look in the first box here, this kind of walks you through the steps to do as you try to graph a rational function. You are welcome to read those, but I am not going to read those to you. I will just kind of demonstrate how we do this. So here's our first example here. They would like us to sketch the graph of g of x equals 3 over x minus 2. And so in order to do that, we need to find a few parts of the graph first. And you can see that vertical asymptote, which is VA, and then horizontal asymptote, followed by any holes that the graph might have. And then lastly, we need to state the domain of the function. So let's go ahead and do that first. And then once we find those things, we will be able to graph the function. So you can see that we have the vertical asymptote, and it's found just like we did in the last section. We simply set the bottom equal to 0 and then solve it. So this particular graph will have a vertical asymptote at x equals 2. Now, the horizontal asymptote is a little bit trickier in this because there is no variable up here. You can see it's just a 3. Now, keep in mind that if there is no variable, the degree of the numerator would actually be 0. So in this case, the degree of the numerator is 0, and the degree of the denominator is 1, which gives us the numerator is less than the denominator. Now, when the numerator is less than the denominator, it gives us a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. Now, following that, any holes in the graph? Holes occur that if we have a common factor on the top and the bottom and we cancel out. In this case, there is no common factor to cancel out, so we do not have any holes. Now, the last thing is the domain, and where the domain comes from, it's kind of a combination of any numbers that you get for the vertical asymptote, as well as any numbers that might have shown up for any holes in the graph. So in this case, there were no holes, but we do have the value x equals 2 as a vertical asymptote. Therefore, x equals 2 needs to be excluded from the domain. Now, as a quick refresher, if I were to draw a graph, you can see on a number line, I can pick any number that I want. I just can't pick 2. So you can see there's 2 distinct areas here, and both of those areas will need to be stated in the domain. So the way we would list the domain is we would list it as negative infinity to 2, and then union 2 to infinity. And there we go. So we have our vertical asymptotes listed, horizontal asymptotes, holes, and domain. Now we need to go ahead and sketch the graph. So the first thing I'm going to do in order to sketch the graph is I'm going to draw a coordinate plane, just like that. And I'll put some hash marks on here. 3 or 4 each way is usually plenty. And now that I have the hash marks on there, I can go ahead and enter the information that I found up here. The main 2 things that we need to talk about or need to use on the graph is going to be the vertical asymptotes and the horizontal asymptotes, because we're going to use those to help shape our graph. So the vertical asymptote occurs at 2, so I put a dashed line right down through 2. And then the horizontal asymptote occurs at y equals 0, just like that. So now the main thing that I want you to see from this, and I should have backed up, is to see the vertical asymptote splits my graph into 2 distinct sections like this. And that's very important for the next step, which is going to be to make a table for each of those 2 sections. Now we do still have this horizontal asymptote, but that's not as important to the graphing at first. The vertical asymptote splits this into two pieces. Therefore, we must make two tables. Now, where our values from our table come from is they are based on where this vertical asymptote is. This vertical asymptote is at 2. So my table to the right needs to have x values that are bigger than 2. So I'm going to draw in 3, 4, and 5. Now, my table on this side, you can notice it is to the left of that vertical asymptote. So that table needs values that are less than 2. So I'm going to use 1, 0, and -1. Now, once we have our x values here, you can see that we've chosen our x values. They each need to be put in to the function right in x, right there, so we can get our y values. So I'm going to show you the math for a couple. I'm not going to show you all of them, but this should show you how I'm getting these values. So starting with 3, if I put the number 3 right in there for x, I will end up with 3 over 3 minus 2, which is 3 over 1, which is 3. So the y value for 3 is 3. Now if I put the number 4 in, I get 3 over 4 minus 2, which is 3 over 2, which gives me 1 1/2. And then the last value, 5, if I put the number 5 in, I end up with 3 over 5 minus 2, which gives me 3 over 3, which is 1. Now, continuing that for these x values over here, when I put the number 1 in, I end up with 1 minus 2 on the bottom, which gives me -1. 3 divided by -1 is -3. Put a 0 in, I end up with -3 over 2, which is -1 1/2. And then the last one, if I put a -1 in, I have -1 minus 2, which is -3. 3 divided by -3 is -1. So now I have all of my ordered pairs that I can now go back and graph. So we'll start with 3, 3. 3, 3 starts right there. Then I have 4, 1/2, 1 1/2. And then I have 5, 1, which would be right there. So you can kind of see what this graph is doing. It is curving. So as it approaches and it goes down here, it's going to flatten out because of that asymptote on the bottom. And in a similar fashion, as this graph comes up, it is going to curve and end up going almost straight up in the air. Now moving to the other side, you can see I have 1, -3, which would be right here. I have 0, -1 1/2. And then I have -1, -1, which will be right there. So again, this graph, as it approaches this vertical asymptote, it's going to shoot downwards. And then as it comes up here and approaches this horizontal asymptote, it's going to flatten out. And there is the graph of 3 over x minus 2. Okay, well, guys, I hope that made sense. You can see the procedure to going about graphing these. It's always the same. You will start out by finding your vertical and horizontal asymptotes, followed by any holes, and then state the domain. And then you make a table for each side of the vertical asymptote, get your values, plot your values, and then sketch your graph. So if you do have any questions, as always, feel free to email me. Have a great day.